5 world records, not career milestones, not tournament highlights. 5 separate FIBA world records shattered in a single game, the very first game Caitlin Clark ever played for the United States senior national team. And the head coaching staff's response to that historic performance? Pull her off the ball? Shuffle the rotation? Tell every reporter who asks that this is a team and everyone deserves their turn. What you are about to hear is how that philosophy collapsed in real time, and the story of the interim coach who stepped into the void and told the world exactly what had gone wrong, on camera, at a podium, with every media credential in the building watching. This is not speculation. This is not social media noise. This is what actually happened inside Team USA's FIBA qualifying run. And the implications are still rippling outward across every level of women's basketball right now. If this channel is where you come to cut through the narratives and get to what is actually happening in the WNBA, hit that like button right now and subscribe. There is a lot to unpack here, and you are going to want to be here for all of it. Let's go back to the beginning, because the context around this story matters more than most people realize. Kara Lawson came into this USA basketball qualifying campaign carrying a coaching philosophy she had been applying consistently: equal distribution of the ball, shared playing time across a roster full of accomplished professionals, and a team identity built around the idea that no single player should define the group. In concept, that framework has genuine merit. International tournaments are won through chemistry, depth, and collective execution. No serious observer argues against those principles at face value. The problem is what happens when one player on your roster is operating on a fundamentally different plane than anyone else in the building. When Caitlin Clark took the floor against Senegal, she was playing in her first senior national team game. The nerves, the adjustment period, the learning curve that every player experiences at a new level. None of that applied. She broke 5 FIBA world records in a single appearance. Assists, efficiency, total statistical dominance at a level that international women's basketball had never recorded before. This was not a hot shooting night. This was a player announcing to the entire sport that she was the most complete offensive engine on the planet, and doing it in a setting where the world was watching with a microscope pointed directly at every possession she touched. The logical basketball move, the obvious, undeniable basketball move, was to build the next game's offensive identity around what Clark had just demonstrated. Make her the engine, get everyone else moving off her reads, let the record-breaking formula run at full speed. That is not what happened. What happened instead was a rotation adjustment that moved Clark either off the ball or to the bench during critical stretches of subsequent games. And the reasoning Lawson offered to reporters was not tactical, it was philosophical. Every player on this roster is a starter in the WNBA. This is a team. Everyone deserves their time. Those are not coaching adjustments. Those are sentiment statements. And when the gap between sentiment and scoreboard becomes visible enough for the casual fan to spot it in real time, you do not have a coaching philosophy problem. You have a results problem. The moment that crystallized the entire situation for people watching at home came when a reporter asked Lawson a direct question about Caitlin Clark's role in the offense. No ambiguity, no room to sidestep. And Lawson did not answer it. She acknowledged the question, pivoted into team philosophy language, praised the collective willingness of the roster to sacrifice, and moved on. If you watch that press conference back-to-back with Clark's Senegal game footage, the disconnect was almost uncomfortable to witness. The reporter asked about one player, Lawson talked about everyone. But here is the dimension of this story that most coverage missed entirely, and it fundamentally changes what this conflict actually represents. Sitting in that same coaching room, working on that same staff, was Stephanie White, the head coach of the Indiana Fever, the head coach of Caitlin Clark's professional team, the same Stephanie White who, across the 2025 WNBA regular season, operated an offensive system that frequently moved Clark off the ball, reduced her pick-and-roll initiations, and structured possessions around a more deliberate, committee-oriented approach. Think about what that alignment actually means. You had 2 coaches, one running Team USA's qualifying campaign, one running Clark's WNBA franchise, both operating from the same foundational philosophy, both apparently more comfortable when Caitlin Clark was doing less. Both on the same staff, in the same building, implementing the same limiting framework on the most marketable and productive player in the sport at the exact same time. When fans started calling it the anti-Caitlin Clark plan, they were not being dramatic. They were identifying a documented pattern that was producing measurable, visible results, and not in a positive direction. The numbers did not require interpretation. In the stretches where Clark was running the offense, leading transition, pushing pace, distributing from the top of the key, Team USA looked like the juggernaut they were supposed to be. Assists elevated. Open shots appeared in rhythm. The team moved with purpose and efficiency that matched their talent level. In the stretches where Clark was managed off the ball or sat entirely, the offense became something else. Half-court possessions that ran out of ideas before the shot clock reached 10. Ball movement that stalled mid-possession. A roster full of elite athletes standing in spots, waiting for something to happen that was not coming. The contrast was not subtle. You did not need a statistical breakdown to see it. You could feel it through the screen. Clark herself never went public with frustration. No passive-aggressive post-game comments. No cryptic social media posts. No coded language in interviews designed to pressure the coaching staff into a change. She showed up, played her minutes, posted her numbers, and let the footage speak for itself. But after the game against Puerto Rico, where zone defenses disrupted the offense's rhythm and the pace dropped noticeably, Clark acknowledged that the team needed to play faster, that the ball needed to come out of the zone earlier. That pace was the answer. She said it the way a professional says things when they are trying not to create a story. Anyone who had watched her play knew exactly what it meant. Let me run this offense. Stop taking it out of my hands. The situation might have stayed in that ambiguous middle space, a tension visible in the box scores, but never quite reaching a breaking point publicly. If not for what happened next. Heading into the matchup against New Zealand, the story took a turn that nobody on the outside had seen coming. Kara Lawson was gone. Not reassigned for a single game, not stepping back for a clearly stated reason, not sitting out with an explanation that USA Basketball had the courtesy to share with anyone. She was simply not on the sideline. No official announcement, no injury report, no statement released through any channel. One day she was running press conferences and navigating questions about Caitlin Clark's role. And the next day the head coaching position was occupied by someone else entirely. To this day, the full circumstances of Lawson's departure from that tournament have not been made transparently public. And that silence is its own kind of story. The kind of silence that an engaged, analytically minded fan base fills with theories faster than any official statement could contain them. The most important question hanging over Lawson's unexplained absence is not about logistics. It is about what the absence itself tells us about the internal temperature of that coaching staff in the final days before everything changed. When a head coach disappears mid-tournament with no explanation, and the interim who replaces her immediately undoes her most visible and controversial decision, the timeline starts to construct its own narrative, whether anyone in the organization wants it to or not. Drop a comment right now and tell me, before Tibbetts stepped in, did you see this shift coming, or did Lawson's disappearance from the sideline catch you completely off guard? Because the answer says a lot about how closely you have been reading this situation. Make sure you are subscribed, because the next chapter of this story is already building. Into that vacuum stepped Nate Tibbetts, the head coach of the Phoenix Mercury. No transition period, no ceremony, no runway to ease into the role. He walked into the building as Team USA's interim head coach and made his first significant decision before a single minute of action tipped off against New Zealand. He put Caitlin Clark in the starting lineup. No committee meeting, no philosophical debate about rotation equity, no speech about how everyone deserves their moment. He looked at the available information, the game footage, the box scores, the record-breaking evidence that had been sitting in front of everyone from Game 1, identified the most effective player on the roster, and started her. The starting 5 Tibbetts sent onto the floor: Kelsey Plum, Caitlin Clark, Paige Buchers, Ryan Howard, and Angel Reese. 3 veterans with international experience. 2 players whose games are specifically designed to thrive when an elite point guard is pushing pace and finding them in transition. All 5 complementing each other's skill sets in ways that required zero additional explanation. The result was not a close game. Team USA defeated New Zealand 101-46, a 55-point margin of victory. Clark led the team in efficiency and assists, running the offense with precisely the freedom and pace that her game is engineered for. Transition opportunities materialized at a rate the offense had not produced all tournament. The ball moved with purpose. Open looks appeared in rhythm rather than through desperation at the end of a stagnant possession. It looked, to anyone who had watched the previous games, like a fundamentally different team had taken the floor. But the defining moment of the entire tournament did not happen during the game. It happened after the final buzzer. Nate Tibbetts stood at the podium and said something that coaches almost never say. He acknowledged publicly, directly, and without the insulation of diplomatic language, that the approach before him had not been working. He described the rotations as having been mixed around too much. He said the group had not been given sufficient time to build chemistry as a consistent unit. He praised the starting lineup: Clark, Plum, Buchers, Reese, and Howard, by name, and made clear that this combination represented the direction the team needed to move in. When a reporter asked him specifically about Clark's role in the starting group, Tibbetts did not deflect. He explained how the pieces connected, validated what Clark brings to the offense at full pace, and let the implication land without any softening. He ate crow on live television, a sitting coach, at a media podium, essentially confirming that the staff before him had gotten the Caitlin Clark situation wrong. That does not happen in coaching circles. The unwritten rule across professional and international programs is that you protect the staff before you. You use language that leaves room. You say things like, "We are still working through different combinations," or "Every game presents its own unique challenges." You do not stand in front of every major outlet covering the tournament and effectively tell the room that your best player was being mismanaged. That is not how these ecosystems function. Tibbetts did it anyway. And the reason it spread across every corner of WNBA social media within hours of the press conference is that it confirmed what the most engaged segment of this audience had been saying for over a year. The system was not built for Caitlin Clark. It was built around a philosophy that treated her as one piece of an equal puzzle rather than the engine the entire machine runs through. Real quick, if this kind of analysis is what keeps you coming back to this channel, hit that join button below. Every member directly supports the depth of coverage you are getting here. We keep going deeper because of you. The data from this qualifying run is now part of the permanent record. When Clark is running the offense, setting the pace, initiating from pick and roll, threading passes that collapse an entire defensive structure, Team USA functions at historically documented levels. When the offense is restructured away from her, the production drops in ways that are immediately visible to any informed observer. This is not a narrative that advocates constructed after the fact. This is documented evidence from the highest level of international women's basketball competition, preserved in box scores and broadcast footage that anyone can access. The coaching community cannot unsee this data, USA Basketball cannot unsee it, and most critically, Stephanie White cannot unsee it. Share this video with someone who has been following the Team USA situation because the context we just walked through is getting skipped in most of the coverage out there. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment to do it. The next chapter of this story is closer than people think. White remains the head coach of the Indiana Fever. She is still coaching Caitlin Clark every day through a full WNBA regular season. And the philosophical approach she brought to the USA Basketball staff, the same framework that produced those stagnant half-court possessions and drew those indirect but unmistakable comments from Clark after Puerto Rico, is now sitting in direct contrast to a 55-point demolition that happened the moment a different coach gave Clark the freedom to run. The 2025 WNBA season showed glimpses of what the Fever can become. Aaliyah Boston established herself as one of the league's most reliable interior anchors, a player who creates space by drawing defensive attention and who finishes at a rate that forces opposing coaches to make difficult help decisions. Sophie Cunningham brought a competitive edge and shooting confidence off the wing that elevated the team's offensive floor on her best nights. The roster, when examined on paper, has genuine championship-contending ingredients. The gap between what Indiana showed on their best nights and what this team could look like with Clark consistently operating at the pace this tournament just documented, that gap is now a much harder conversation to avoid in any serious analysis of the franchise's trajectory. Cunningham, specifically, is exactly the type of player who becomes exponentially more dangerous in a Clark-led hard pace and space offense. She does not need the ball in her hands to force a defensive adjustment. She spaces the floor. She plays with a physical intensity that elevates everyone around her. Put her in an offense where Clark is pushing in transition and finding shooters before the defense can recover, and Cunningham becomes a matchup problem that opposing coaches have to game plan for specifically. That combination has not been fully unlocked at the professional level yet. The broader question hanging over the entire league is whether the lessons produced in this qualifying tournament actually travel back into the ecosystems that need them most. Does Tibbetts get named permanent head coach of Team USA? That decision, whenever it comes, will signal something important about how USA basketball views the Clark era and what kind of program they intend to build heading toward the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles, a home Olympics, the largest domestic audience women's basketball will ever play in front of. The version of Team USA that just won by 55 points, with Clark running the offense at full capacity, is a compelling early preview of what that program could look like on that stage. But only if the organization makes the right call about both who is coaching it and how that coach is empowered to make roster decisions. There is also the question of Lawson herself. The full story behind her departure from this tournament has not been told publicly. Until it is, the speculation about whether internal disagreement over Clark's role contributed to how things ended will continue to circulate. If Lawson returns, if she reclaims the head coaching position and moves to reinstall the rotation philosophy that characterized the early part of this campaign, then everything Tibbetts built, the chemistry, the lineup, the documented evidence of what this team looks like at full capacity, becomes a negotiation rather than a foundation. What Tibbetts proved is not a coaching theory anymore. It is a documented result. When Clark is the engine, this team breaks records. When the engine is managed down, the production drops. The question of who runs this program going forward is not just a personnel decision. It is a statement about what USA Basketball believes women's basketball should look like at its highest level. The ripple effects of what happened in San Juan are already moving toward Indianapolis, toward USA Basketball's front office, and toward every coaching decision that gets made around Caitlin Clark from this point forward. Subscribe and turn on notifications right now, because when the permanent decision on Team USA's head coaching position comes down, this channel will break down exactly what it means for the program, for Clark's path to 2028, and for the Indiana Fever heading into a 2026 season that suddenly has a much higher ceiling than anyone was discussing before Nate Tibbetts walked to that podium and told the truth. This story has one more chapter left to write. Make sure you're here when it drops.